The floor beneath the grass, when I scrape it with my boot, is stone. Flat-laid limestone flags, most of them intact.
It goes further than I
Someone
thought.
paved this courtyard, which tells me this wasn't just a defensive
could be
tower. There was life happening here.
This is the
People
place.
cooking, sleeping,
It hasn't
storing
changed.
things, arguing about things. The flags are still here, waiting under 2 centuries of grass and soil. I walk back to the tower arch and sit on the stone threshold, eating a sandwich I made this morning in the dark of the car, watching the light shift on the water below. The sea is lightening as the morning opens up, moving from gray-green to something closer to blue, with long lines of silver where the swells catch the sun.
Subscribe, and like the video.
A pair of jackdaws land on top of the north wall and look at me with that specific jackdaw expression that communicates absolute contempt combined with mild curiosity. I eat my sandwich. They watch me eat my sandwich. We reach an understanding of sorts. This is where I'll start, not with the big repairs, not yet. The first thing any restoration needs is an honest accounting of what you have. A true survey. Measurements, photographs in my head, structural assessments, material inventory. A week, maybe 2, just walking and looking and thinking before I touch anything. The temptation is always to start moving stone immediately, to feel productive, to see progress. But the buildings that go wrong are almost always the ones where someone started working before they finished thinking. I've made that mistake. Once is
The level
enough.
shows a slight deviation
So the
here.
first week is slow, methodical.
Note that.
I map the
And check the
existing
upper course for
walls,
symmetry.
height, thickness, condition at every meter. I catalog the fallen stones, sorting them roughly by size and shape, because when you're relaying a collapsed wall, you want to know what you have before you start. I clear the interior of loose debris, not the hawthorn, not yet, that's a later negotiation, and begin to expose more of the flagstone floor. Beneath the soil layer, the flags are in remarkable condition. Large, heavy pieces, some of them half a meter across, fitting together with a mason's eye for natural variation. No mortar between them, just careful placement and weight. By the end of day 3, I've cleared maybe a third of the courtyard floor. My back knows it.
God, that's
My
nuts.
hands, already roughened from other work, are
Keep going.
acquiring a new set
It'll
of
heal.
calluses specific to
Yeah,
this
no.
stone, this texture, this particular way
Still
of
here.
gripping and lifting.
Nothing changes.
My orange flower shirt is
I'll
gray
get
with
back to it.
limestone dust, and I am not sorry about this. It was already serving its purpose, which was to keep me warm and not much else.
The depth here.
On day 4, I find the well. It's in
too
the
perfect.
southwest corner, covered by a flat stone that I almost step on and then don't, because something about the way it sits, slightly proud of the surface around it, a faint circular depression, makes me look more carefully. I get down on my knees and press my ear to the stone, then knock on it. The echo underneath is distinctive, deep and hollow and ringed with moisture. I lever the stone off with a pry bar and look down
recognize
into a
this place.
shaft of perfectly fitted stonework dropping into
know what this
darkness,
is.
and maybe 4 meters down, a circle of reflected light. Water. Still water. A castle well that's been sealed and sitting for who knows how long, and there is still water in it. I lower a stick down on a piece of rope and bring it back up wet. Not stagnant smelling, actually clear and cold, and I'm careful here, I'm not drinking it yet, but promising. This changes things. A water source on the cliff top, built into the castle itself. This was a serious habitation. Whoever lived here was not roughing it. They had permanence in mind. I sit beside the uncovered well for a while, thinking about what this place was, what it meant to the people who built it. Not a ruin then, a home, a fortress and a home
right.
at once,
This
which is
section
maybe
first.
not so different from what I'm turning it into now. The second week is when the real work begins. The north wall is my first structural priority. The collapse there is the most significant. 6 meters of fallen wall means the interior is exposed to the prevailing wind, which comes off the sea in the northwest, and when it decides to commit seriously. I need that wall back before I do anything else, because everything else depends on having an enclosed space to work in and to eventually sleep in. Relaying a collapsed wall is one of those jobs that looks straightforward and turns out to be a conversation. You think you're just putting stones back where they were, but stone walls, especially old ones built without mortar, have a logic to them, a specific interlocking arrangement, a hierarchy of which stones carry load, and which stones fill gaps, and which stones are wedges that make the whole thing stable. When a wall collapses, it destroys that arrangement, and you can't just reverse engineer it from looking at a pile of stones. What you can do is understand the principles. The face stones, the large, flat-faced pieces that form the visible surface, those go in first, placed with their best face outward, bedded level, with a slight backward tilt that leans the wall inward towards its own center of mass. In between them, smaller stones fill the core, packed tight, each one placed to transfer load downward and outward to the face stones. And then, every so often, a through stone, a long piece that spans the full width of the wall and ties both faces together, so the wall moves as a single unit rather than two skins with rubble between them. My best through stone, I find it in the pile, a beautiful piece, maybe 90 centimeters long and 30 wide, dense and straight, almost too heavy for me alone. I lever it up with a timber fulcrum and inch it into position using a combination of rope, patience, and language I don't use around other people. When it finally seats, slides into its space with a low grinding sound, and then settles with a solidity that you feel through the ground, I lean against the wall and breathe for a minute. Small victories, you collect them. By the end of week 2, I have the north wall back to about 2 meters, not its full original height, which I'll work out from the surviving sections, but enough to close the space, enough to begin to feel like an interior again. The new stones aren't the same color as the old ones. They're a slightly lighter gray, fresher, with less weathering, and they never will be, not in my lifetime. But the fit is honest, the logic is sound. In 100 years, if someone stands where I'm standing now, they won't be able to tell which course of stone was laid last week and which was laid 6 centuries ago.
Never thought I'd
That's
get this
the goal.
attached to a floral
Not
shirt.
invisible, honest. My shirt, by this point, has evolved. The orange is intact. The flowers are intact. The limestone dust has become a permanent feature, a kind of patina. One of the sleeves has acquired a long smear of dark green from the lichen I keep knocking off the old stones, and I've begun to think of it as decorative. I've been wearing it every day because it's the one I don't mind destroying, and at this rate it's going to end up being the shirt I'm buried in, which is a commitment I didn't expect to make to a garment that cost me €7. Week 3, and the east wall gap becomes my next project. This is different from the north wall because the gap here isn't a collapse, it's an opening that was modified over time and eventually lost its original structure. What I have is a roughly 3-meter wide hole with irregular edges on both sides. The stones from whatever filled this opening are gone, taken for other building projects at some point in the last few centuries, which was common, which is annoying, which is something I will simply have to solve. I spend a day quarrying from the cliff face itself, not the cliff edge, which I'm not going near with a chisel and a sense of self-preservation intact, but a rock outcropping about 20 meters north of the castle where the same limestone appears, the same grade density, the same quality. I work along the natural fracture lines in the stone, scoring with a chisel and then driving wooden wedges soaked in water into the cracks. An old technique, almost no force required, just patience as the wood swells and the stone opens cleanly along lines it was already considering. The quarried pieces aren't large. I'm working alone and I have to be able to move what I cut, but they're good, dense and straight and honest. The east wall gap takes most of week 3 to fill. I decide to leave a proper doorway, narrower than the gap, properly arched with a lintel stone I shaped carefully over 2 full days, checking the curve against a template I make from a piece of bent wire. Getting a lintel right is one of those things that requires a kind of meditative focus I find genuinely pleasurable. The noise in your head goes quiet. There's just the stone and the chisel and the sound of each strike, a clean, sharp tap when you're on the right line, a duller thud when you're not, and the slow emergence of the shape you had in your mind. When I set that lintel, with rope and timber and a very careful sequence of moves that I rehearse in my head 3 times before I do them, and it fits, it holds, the arch below it is clean
Almost
and
there.
true, I step back and look at the east wall,
Yes.
and it looks, for the first time, like a castle
Hold.
door. Not a gap, a
Done.
door, a place you
solid.
walk through with intention. I walk through it,
Yes.
from the outside in.
Finally, a proper
On the
door.
other side, in the courtyard, the afternoon light is doing something extraordinary. The sun has dropped to the west and is coming in low and golden over the sea, angling through the new doorway and painting a long rectangle of warm light across the limestone flags. Dust motes are moving in the beam, stone dust from the day's work mostly, suspended in the still air of the enclosed courtyard. The hawthorn in the northwest corner is catching the light in its leaves, which have come in fully now, small, dark green, tough. I sit down on the flags in the middle of that rectangle of sunlight and eat another sandwich, and I think, this is already something. Even before the tower, even before the roof, even before anything you might call comfort, this is already something worth having made. The hawthorn and I are still negotiating, but we're getting somewhere. Month 2 begins with the tower. The tower is the project within the project, the thing that will define this place, that will make it visible from the sea and from the road inland, that will eventually be the reason someone stops and looks and wonders. A castle without its tower is just old walls. A tower changes the whole character of the thing. The existing tower base is extraordinary. I've said this, but I keep returning to it. 2 meters of solid wall, tight-jointed stone, a curve that's perfectly
is just above
geometric
the
even after
transition.
all this time.
4
The
meters
collapse
up.
happened above a
Nothing
certain
below is
height,
touched.
and that height, maybe 4 meters from the base, is where the wall begins to thin, where someone in the original construction moved from defensive thickness to residential utility. They were right to do it. The lower section doesn't need to change, it just needs to be continued. I'm adding 3 more levels, each with a slight reduction in wall thickness, each with a small window opening in the seaward face, and a simple conical cap that will shed the Atlantic rain and give the tower its proper silhouette against the sky. The windows are my favorite part of any build. They're the part that
Incredible.
transforms a structure from an enclosure
subtle
into
you
a
could miss
place.
it.
The decision about where light enters, how it moves through the space at different times of day, where shadows fall, what you see when you look out, that's a decision that outlasts everything. The people who built this originally put a window in the east face of the tower, and I know this because the jamstones are still there, the reveals still visible in the surviving section. I'm going to honor that
right.
window, and I'm going
This
to
one's
add
secure.
2 more. A western
need to
one
grab
for
the
the
next
sunset,
piece.
a northern one for the winter light, which is a colder
Secure.
and more honest kind of light than summer, and I think it
All right,
suits a
let's get this
cliff-top
done.
castle. Building up is different from building along. On the ground, gravity is
Secure.
helping you.
The line is
You're
clear.
stacking weight down
can
into
begin.
stable footings. Once you're above your own head, gravity becomes the problem. Every stone going up has to go up, which means lifting, which means systems. I build a timber scaffold on the inside face of the tower, a simple thing, just 2 uprights with horizontal ledgers, rising as the wall rises.
the only
From
way.
outside, I rig a rope and pulley system off a timber A-frame
going.
I've set on the intact
You're almost
section of the
there.
old south wall. Each stone goes up in a rope cradle. I load it below, walk around to the scaffold inside, pull the rope, hand over hand, until the stone reaches height, then swing it in and guide it onto the wall. It takes time. It is extremely good for the forearms. Day 12 of the tower work, it rains. Not gentle rain. Atlantic rain, driven horizontal by a west wind that has come a long way and has no patience left by the time it reaches this cliff.
Some things just cannot
I've
be
rigged a
controlled.
tarpaulin over the most exposed section of the scaffold, but tarpaulins and genuine Atlantic weather have a complicated relationship, and by midday the tarpaulin has expressed its opinion by tearing free on one side and snapping in the wind like something angry. I work anyway. The stone doesn't care about rain. If anything, it's easier to handle when wet, with a bit more friction in the grip. My orange flower shirt, however, has become translucent. This is a new experience for us both. There's something clarifying about working in bad weather. You stop thinking about what you're going to do next, about the overall plan, about the 3 levels still to come. You think about this stone, this placement, this moment. The narrowness of it is almost a relief. The rain makes everything immediate. By late afternoon, the wind drops slightly, and I get 2 more courses of stone laid before the light goes. I cover the top of the wall with a piece of heavy plastic weighted down with stones, gather my tools, and walk off the cliff top feeling tired in the specific way that's almost pleasant, every muscle accounted for, every part of me present. The month moves in rhythms like this, good days and weather days. The tower rises, slowly, because it's right to go slowly, because each course of stone needs to be checked and leveled and true before the next one goes on. A tower that leans, even slightly, is a tower that falls. I check plumb constantly with a simple lead weight on a string that's been doing this kind of work for thousands of years and continues to do it better than anything else. The second window opening, the west one, I frame with jamstones I've spent 3 days shaping. The reveal is angled outward, widening as it faces the sea, which means the window catches light from a wider arc of sky, and also means you can stand in the embrasure and look north along the cliff face without craning. I do this the evening I finish the framing, leaning in the stone opening with the sun going down behind me and painting the sea in long bands of orange and copper. A gannet, huge, white, ridiculous, comes off the water below and passes the window at almost exactly eye level, looks at me briefly, and continues
flying.
north without comment.
I should do the same.
Good. We're all
Let's finish
busy.
this.
The cap of the tower is a problem I've been
God
thinking
damn it,
about
this
since
Corbelling
week
isn't
1.
right.
A proper conical stone cap,
one all
a
over
dunce
again.
hat of
No, just
corbelled
let me think.
limestone that closes the tower and sheds rain, requires either prefabricated
is
conical
off.
sections
It needs to
or a
taper
technique
more
of
sharply.
corbelling inward that I've read about extensively and never actually done. I'm going to do it. Corbelling means each successive course of stone projects slightly inward from the one below, reducing the opening gradually until you can close it with a single capstone. The physics are sound. Each projecting stone is counterweighted by the mass behind it, but the geometry requires precision
Almost there.
because you're
Just a little more
effectively
on this
building
angle.
a circle that gets smaller at a rate
Needs
you
to be
have to
perfect.
calculate before you start. Too steep, and the inward projection becomes unstable. Too shallow, and you run out of height before
No.
the opening closes.
No, that's not right.
I do the geometry with a stick in the dirt
Yes,
of the
yes, it
courtyard
is. I
floor.
had it right all
I
along.
check it twice. I check it again the next morning because I don't trust my evening mathematics. Then I start. The corbelling takes 2 weeks. There are 4 courses, each one reducing the opening by a carefully measured amount, each one requiring a different set of faces on the individual stones, the inner face angled, the outer face maintaining the tower's outward appearance. I am working at the top of the scaffold, 7 meters above the courtyard floor, with the cliff edge 40 meters behind me and the
Work
Atlantic
matters more than
visible
the
in
view.
all its gray and silver enormity whenever I look up from the stone in my
South
hands.
Tower.
I do not look up
almost
too
there.
often, not because
as
of
it
the
was meant
height,
to be.
I'm fine with the height, but because the view is too extraordinary and I lose 20 minutes every time I look at it. The capstone is the last thing, a single flat piece, roughly triangular, that I've been shaping for 3 days. It weighs about 40 kilograms
right.
and has to go up on the rope system
This has to
and
be
then
perfect.
be
One
guided in
chance.
from the inside, a maneuver that requires me to be at
Almost
the
there.
top
Keep
of the
it steady.
scaffold with my
Now,
hands
just a
through the
little more.
closing corbelled opening, which means my shoulders through
Yes.
the opening, which means a certain amount of committed contortion. It goes in. It seats. The opening is closed. I am on top of the scaffold inside a tower that is now structurally complete, and the light coming through the 3 windows is extraordinary, and I allow myself a moment that is not quite crying, but is in that neighborhood. Then I have to get down, because I have a lot more work to do. The interior is next. The tower has 2 floors, ground level, where the original builder probably kept animals or stores, and an upper
Level
level,
3, first
accessed
tread
by
here.
a stair
8 inches
I'm
up,
going to
rotate
build
16.
against the
Need to check
inside
your
wall,
pocket depth,
where
16
the
inches,
living
7
happened.
left. That's the one.
The
Spiral
upper
set.
floor
This
is where the windows are,
here.
where you can see the sea, where in winter you'd have a fire going in the hearth I'm going to build in the north corner, away from the prevailing wind. The floor structure for the upper level is timber, heavy oak beams that I've
steady.
sourced from a
Watch the
timber
frame.
yard 2 hours
Almost
inland
there. Just
and
a
brought
little
up in
further.
2 trips in the back of a
Easy
battered
now.
van.
Make it through.
Green oak, fresh cut, which will dry in place over the next year, and which I prefer for structural work because it's dimensionally stable as it dries when you use it correctly. Each beam is notched into the wall. I cut the pockets with a chisel, going
Almost
carefully
there.
because the tower walls are something I don't want to compromise, and seated with a slight
Set.
camber upward because green
The camber
oak
looks
will
true.
settle as it dries, and a beam that
We need to
starts
secure
level
the next
will end
section
up
before the
sagging.
rain.
The stair is stone. 15 steps, each one a single piece of limestone, corbelled out from the wall in a tight spiral that climbs from the ground floor to the upper level in just over 2 full turns. This is the most technically demanding stonework I've done on this project. Each tread has to be shaped to the spiral's geometry, has to be stable under foot load, and has to be set into the wall at the correct angle. I spend a day on each step, 15 days of stair. My hands, by the end, know limestone in a way that they didn't before. The grain of it, the planes along which it wants to split, the places where it's dense, and the places where it'll crumble if you push. The first time I walk the finished stair, testing each tread, feeling for any movement, any give, is one of the better moments of the whole project. Stone stairs built into a stone tower, spiral and tight and solid, leading upward into a room with 3 windows and the sea. I walk it slowly. Each step makes a small sound, my boot sole on limestone, slightly hollow, a sound that's been in stairwells like this for 1,000 years. The hearth goes in over 3 days. It's a deep fireplace, deep enough to take a proper fire, with the chimney flue I've built up through the tower wall, exiting through the south face well below the cap. The lintel is a single massive piece, 110 centimeters of solid stone that I'm proud of than almost anything else on this project. The fireback is lined with a dense fire brick that'll reflect heat into the room rather than absorbing it into the wall. The flagstone hearth extends 2 feet in front of the opening, flush with the timber floor, framed with a simple
That's it.
stone
It's done.
step. I build the first fire in the hearth on a Tuesday evening in early autumn. The draw is immediate and strong, the chimney's doing its
draw
job,
is strong.
pulling the smoke cleanly away, and the fireback is already beginning to radiate. The room fills with the smell of the first fire in a new hearth, wood smoke and hot stone, and something underneath, some chemical memory of all the fires that ever burned in fireplaces in all the centuries, a smell that means shelter in some very old part of the brain. I sit on the floor of the upper room, back against the wall, watching the fire establish itself. The western window is dark now, night has come in from the sea, but I can hear the water below, the long, slow collapse of waves against the base of the cliff. The fire crackles and settles. An ember pops and falls onto the flagstone hearth. I think about the people who built this originally, about what it meant to them to sit in a room on a cliff above the Atlantic with a fire going and walls around them that they'd built with their own hands. The permanence they were reaching for, the statement they were making against impermanence, against the sea, against time. It didn't last, of course. Nothing does. But the stones lasted. The arch lasted. The well lasted. The floor lasted. The idea of this place lasted, latent in a pile of rubble on a headland, waiting for someone who'd look at ruins and see a home. Here we are.
The route bends here.
The courtyard work takes another 3 weeks. The Hawthorne and I have reached our agreement. It stays in the northwest corner, I route the courtyard around it, and we don't discuss it further. I relay the flagstones in the sections where they've shifted, tamp the joints with fine gravel, and leave the surface as close to original as I can manage. In the southeast corner, against the south wall, I build a low stone bench, wide and flat, angled slightly to face the sea that catches afternoon sun and is going to be, I think, the place I spend most of my time. The south wall gets a simple lean-to added against its inner face, a timber-framed structure with a stone tile roof, which gives me a covered workspace and eventually a place to store wood for the tower hearth. The tiles are reclaimed, salvaged from a farm building that was being demolished 40 kilometers away, and they're a slightly warmer color than the castle stone, terracotta-ish, which I initially worried about and have come to think of as right. A sign that different hands, different times, different materials have all found their way to this place.
There.
The gate in the east wall gets
Take
a
your
proper
time, don't
door,
strain yourself.
heavy timber, made from the oak
Looks solid.
offcuts from the tower floor beams, banded with iron straps that I've had made at a metalworks in the nearest town. The ironworker looked at my sketches for about 30 seconds and then made exactly
Yes.
what I wanted, which is the most satisfying
it.
professional
Exactly
interaction
what I
I've
wanted.
ever had. The door swings on heavy iron pintles, pivot hinges set into the
done.
stone, and closes with a wooden bar
Finally.
that drops into iron brackets. It doesn't lock. I don't think I need it to lock. I'm not sure who I think is going to come up here other than jackdaws, and the jackdaws are frankly coming in over the walls. The last element is the viewing platform. This was the addition that wasn't in the original plan, or rather, it was in a version of the plan I had sitting half-formed in the back of my mind since the day I first stood on the cliff edge and looked out at the water. A simple stone platform extending from the south wall towards the cliff edge, not too close, not dangerously close, but close enough, with a stone parapet that you can lean on and look south along the coast, or west out to sea, or down at the water far below. The platform is corbelled out from the wall, the same principle as the tower cap, but horizontal, with heavy stone flags on top and a parapet built to chest height. It's maybe 3 meters by 2, which is enough for 2 people to stand side by side comfortably, or for 1 person to lie down on a warm afternoon, which I intend to do as soon as possible. The last stone of the parapet goes in on a morning in mid-October. The weather has been turning. The first proper autumn swells are building in from the southwest, long, organized lines of water that have come from very far away and are arriving at this cliff with a kind of purposeful weight. The sound is different now than it was in summer, deeper, more continuous, a bass note under everything. I set the last stone. I smooth the mortar joint with my thumb. I step back, and then I walk to the east door, through the courtyard, up the spiral stair, through the upper room of the tower, and out through the window I've left open onto the viewing platform, and I stand at the parapet in my orange shirt, which has become something between a shirt and a piece of industrial archaeology at this point, stiff with limestone and salt and work and time, and I look out at the Atlantic.
The sea is extraordinary this morning. The swells are rolling in from the southwest in long, dark lines, and where they hit the cliff base, they explode upward in white columns that rise and fall in slow, satisfying rhythms. Gannets are working the water 2 or 3 kilometers out, 30 or 40 of them, wheeling and diving,